Imagine standing somewhere the sun has never touched. Not once. Not a flicker, not a memory, not even a rumor passed down through generations. This is not the kind of darkness you fix by flipping a switch or waiting until morning. This is the kind of darkness that clocks out of time entirely. Down here, night does not fall. Night has always been clocked in, working overtime, and it does not plan to retire. As you descend through the ocean, sunlight fades fast. Colors peel away one by one, like paint being quietly stolen from the world. Reds vanish first, then oranges, yellows, and before long, everything becomes a blue-grey blur. And then even that gives up. Eventually, light hits a hard limit and just stops trying. The deep ocean is not dim, it is lightless. And a place where photons take one look at the commute and decide it is not worth the effort, and yet life is everywhere. That is the part that messes with your expectations. We are used to thinking of light as the starting gun for life. Plants need it. Food webs depend on it. Our entire surface world logic is built on the assumption that sunlight shows up, does the heavy lifting, and everyone else lives off the benefits. But the deep sea never got that memo. Life here did not wait for light to arrive. It simply rewrote the rules and kept going. If this gentle exploration of how life forms are shaped entirely by darkness and pressure helps you relax tonight, please like the video, subscribe to the Deep Sea documentary channel, and leave a comment sharing when and where you're listening. So this calm science can reach more people who drift off to sleep with the deep ocean. In a world without sunlight, vision loses its starring role. You do not need eyes to admire a sunrise if there has never been one. You do not need bright colors if no one can see them. Instead, survival becomes about sensing, conserving, and enduring. The deep ocean is not fast-paced. It does not reward reckless energy use. It favors patience, efficiency, and a kind of quiet toughness that would make endurance athletes feel emotionally inadequate. Every movement matters when food is unpredictable and energy is precious. Nothing down here is sprinting unless it absolutely has to. Life moves carefully, like it is constantly aware that snacks are rare and calories are sacred. As this is a place where evolution rewards creatures that know how to wait without complaining. If procrastination were a survival skill, the deep sea would be its natural habitat. Darkness also reshapes how danger works. On the surface, predators often rely on speed, surprise, and sight. In eternal night, those strategies get reworked. Hunting becomes less about chasing and more about timing. About being in the right place when opportunity drifts by. In many cases, survival is not about being the strongest or the fastest, but about being stubborn enough to hang around long enough for luck to show up. And luck, down here, tends to fall from above. The deep sea exists beneath the leftovers of the surface world. Tiny scraps of organic material slowly drift downward like marine snow, while a never-ending trickle of crumbs from a table life was never invited to sit at. This slow rain of particles shapes everything. It teaches life to be frugal, to stretch resources, to treat every meal like it might be the last one for a while. Because statistically speaking, it probably is. But darkness does something else, something more subtle. It removes reference points. There are no seasons defined by sunlight, no day-night cycles, no shadows creeping across the ground. Time itself feels different when the environment barely changes. For deep sea life, the world is remarkably stable, cold, dark, and consistent. When nothing changes quickly, evolution leans toward designs built for the long haul. This is not a world of flashy excess. It is a world of quiet optimization. But what makes this even more fascinating is that none of this was planned. There was no grand design meeting where life decided to conquer the abyss. It happened because life, at its core, is incredibly bad at quitting. When conditions become hostile, life does not pack up and leave. It experiments. It trims away what no longer works. It keeps whatever helps it last just a little bit longer. Darkness, instead of being a barrier, became a canvas. And that is the central idea of this journey. The deep sea is not an empty void filled with unfortunate accidents of evolution. It is a thriving, dynamic realm shaped by forces that seem unlivable to us, but are perfectly normal to the organisms that call it home. These creatures are not surviving despite the darkness. They are surviving because they were shaped by it. And so as we move deeper into this world, keep one thing in mind. Life does not need comfort. It does not need light. It does not even need predictability. All it really needs is enough time, enough pressure, and just the right amount of stubborn determination to say, this is fine, even when everything says it should not be. As you sink deeper into the ocean, something invisible but extremely rude starts happening. The water above you piles up, layer by layer, and all that weight has to go somewhere. Spoiler alert, it goes into you. Pressure in the deep sea is not a vague concept or a dramatic metaphor scientists use to sound impressive. It is a physical force that increases relentlessly, squeezing everything below like the universe slowly tightening a very serious hug. At the surface, your body is already under pressure from the atmosphere, but you are used to it. It is the baseline setting of existence. Now imagine descending just 10 meters into the ocean. The pressure doubles. Another 10 meters, it triples. Keep going, and the numbers stop feeling intuitive. By the time you reach the deep sea, the pressure is hundreds of times greater than what you experience right now. That is the equivalent of several fully grown elephants politely but firmly standing on every square inch of your body all at once without asking for consent. For most surface creatures, this kind of pressure is catastrophic. Air-filled spaces collapse, gases compress, structures snap or deform. It is not a dramatic explosion situation. It is worse. It is a slow, crushing failure where the physics of the environment simply disagree with your continued existence. Submarines have to be engineered like armored vaults just to survive it. Human bodies, on the other hand, are not pressure-rated. Deep-sea life took a very different approach. Instead of resisting pressure, they stopped arguing with it. Pressure itself is not inherently deadly. The real problem is imbalance. When the inside of an organism does not match the pressure outside, things start going wrong very quickly. Deep-sea organisms solved this by eliminating empty space wherever possible. No big air pockets, no rigid cavities waiting to collapse. Their bodies are built to be evenly pressurized inside and out, like biological stress balls that refuse to pop. This is why so many deep-sea creatures have soft, compressible tissues. As squishy is not a design flaw down here. It is a survival strategy. Flexible bodies distribute pressure evenly, preventing catastrophic weak points. Where rigid structures would crack, soft ones simply shift. It is not weakness. It is physics-aware architecture. Even at the cellular level, pressure changes everything. High pressure affects how molecules interact, how proteins fold, and how chemical reactions behave. Many surface-dwelling organisms rely on proteins that maintain their shape only within a narrow pressure range. Increase the pressure too much, and those proteins lose their structure, like furniture collapsing under too much weight. Deep-sea organisms evolved proteins that are pressure stable. Their molecular machinery is built to function while being squeezed from all directions. Enzymes continue to work. Our membranes stay intact. Cells carry on like this is completely normal, because to them, it is. If you brought one of these organisms to the surface too quickly, the lack of pressure would be just as dangerous. Their biology expects the squeeze. Take it away, and things fall apart in the opposite direction. Pressure also shapes how movement works. In extreme depths, rapid motion becomes energetically expensive. Muscles behave differently under high pressure, and sudden bursts of activity require more effort. As a result, many deep-sea animals move deliberately, conserving energy and avoiding unnecessary strain. It is not laziness. It is mechanical efficiency under extreme conditions. What is remarkable is how early in evolutionary history this adaptation appeared. As life explored deeper waters, the pressure was one of the first non-negotiable challenges it faced. Species that could tolerate it expanded downward. Those that could not hit a hard limit and stayed shallow. Over time, pressure tolerance became a defining feature, shaping entire lineages that would never again experience anything less than crushing force. And here is the part that really puts things into perspective. To deep-sea organisms, pressure is not a threat. It is background noise. It is the default state of reality. They do not feel crushed because nothing is being crushed. Their bodies are built to exist in equilibrium with their surroundings. What feels extreme to us feels neutral to them. This flips our intuition on its head. We tend to think of extreme environments as places where life is barely holding on. The deep sea tells a different story. Life there is not constantly struggling against pressure. It has already won that fight. Pressure stopped being a problem millions of years ago. It became just another environmental constant, like gravity or temperature. So when we imagine the deep ocean as an alien, hostile place, it is worth remembering that hostility is relative. Pressure only seems terrifying when your biology was not designed for it. For the creatures that evolved under its weight, it is simply the way the world presses back, reminding them gently but firmly that adaptation beats resistance every single time. On the surface, bones are a big deal. They give animals shape, leverage, protection, and the ability to dramatically point at things. Skeletons are the scaffolding of familiar life. They hold muscles in place, protect organs, and make sure gravity does not fold you into a disappointing heap on the ground. But once you leave the sunlit world behind and descend into the deep ocean, bones quietly lose their prestige. Down here, rigidity is not always a virtue. In fact, it can be a liability. The deep sea rewards bodies that can bend, compress, and flow rather than resist. Hard, heavy skeletons are expensive to build and maintain, especially in an environment where resources are scarce and energy is precious. Calcium does not exactly rain from the sky in the deep ocean, and assembling dense skeletal structures requires a steady supply of materials that are not always available. Evolution, being the ruthless accountant that it is, starts looking for cheaper options. Enter gelatinous bodies. Many deep-sea organisms are made mostly of water, arranged into soft tissues that barely hold a shape until something forces them to. These animals look less like solid creatures and more like carefully organized puddles with opinions. Their bodies wobble, ripple, and deform as they move, absorbing forces rather than fighting them. Instead of snapping under stress, they yield gracefully, like biological stress toys that never quite return to their original form. This softness serves multiple purposes. Flexible tissues distribute mechanical forces evenly, reducing the risk of damage. There are no hard joints to crack, no rigid beams to buckle. When the environment pushes back, the body simply gives way a little and carries on. It is not weakness. It is structural diplomacy. Gelatinous bodies also offer a buoyancy advantage. What water-filled tissues naturally match the density of the surrounding seawater, allowing animals to hover effortlessly without constant swimming. This is crucial in an environment where wasting energy is a terrible life choice. Instead of burning calories to stay afloat, these creatures drift, float, and glide, letting physics do the heavy lifting. Gravity still exists, but it is politely ignored. Without heavy bones dragging them down, deep-sea gelatinous animals can occupy the water column with minimal effort. They become three-dimensional drifters, moving vertically as well as horizontally, exploiting space rather than being trapped on a seafloor. In a world where food arrives unpredictably, being able to reposition yourself cheaply is a major advantage. Bones also come with another downside. They lock you into a shape. A rigid skeleton defines where muscles attach and how forces are transmitted. Soft-bodied animals have far more freedom in how they move. Muscles embedded in flexible tissue can contract in complex patterns, producing slow pulses, waves, and undulations that are incredibly efficient in water. It is less about speed and more about control. Think less sprinting athlete and more living screensaver. That said, not all deep-sea animals are completely boneless. Some use cartilage-like structures or lightly reinforced frameworks rather than dense bone. These materials provide just enough support without sacrificing flexibility. It is a compromise approach, offering shape without stiffness, structure without brittleness. Evolution loves compromises when absolutes fail. Of course, giving up bones comes with trade-offs. Soft bodies offer less protection against predators. There is no hard armor to hide behind. Instead, many gelatinous animals rely on transparency. When you are nearly invisible, it is harder for something to notice you in the first place. Being see-through is not a fashion choice. It is defensive minimalism. Soft tissues also heal differently. Damage does not involve broken bones, but tears and deformation. Fortunately, many gelatinous organisms can recover from injuries that would be catastrophic for rigid-bodied animals. Their bodies are less about precise alignment and more about overall integrity. If something gets bent out of shape, it is not the end of the world. It is more of a suggestion. From an evolutionary perspective, abandoning bones represents a shift in priorities. Instead of investing heavily in structural strength, a deep-sea life invests in adaptability, efficiency, and endurance. The environment does not demand speed or brute force. It demands persistence. It favors organisms that can exist with minimal upkeep, quietly occupying space without drawing attention. To us, these creatures may look fragile, like they would dissolve if handled too roughly. And that is true, in the wrong environment. Bring them to the surface, and their delicate balance falls apart. but in their own world, they are perfectly engineered. They are not unfinished versions of surface animals. They are highly specialized solutions to a very specific set of problems. So when you see footage of deep-sea creatures wobbling gently through the dark, looking like sentient gelatin desserts, remember this: bones are only essential if your world demands rigidity. In the deep ocean, key flexibility is not just an advantage, it is a philosophy. If the deep sea had a motto, it would be something like, "Please conserve energy." In a world without sunlight, without plants turning light into food, and without predictable meal schedules, metabolism becomes a delicate balancing act. Down here, eating is not a daily routine, it is an event, sometimes a once-in-a-while miracle. And because of that, the way deep-sea organisms process energy looks very different from anything happening near the surface. On land and in sunlit waters, life burns energy like it expects refills. Plants produce food constantly, animals eat regularly, and metabolisms are tuned for activity. Fast movement, frequent feeding, growth, reproduction, repeat. The deep sea does not offer that luxury. There is no reliable kitchen. Well, there is no guarantee the pantry will ever restock. So life adapted by slowing everything down. Deep-sea metabolism is built around patience. Many deep-sea animals operate at extremely low metabolic rates. Their cells consume energy slowly, their muscles are not designed for constant use, and their bodies prioritize survival over performance. This is not about being weak or underpowered. It is about efficiency. Every chemical reaction inside the body is calibrated to stretch limited energy as far as possible. Think of it like running your phone on ultra-low power mode permanently. The screen is dim, background apps are shut down, and nothing updates unless it absolutely has to. That is how deep-sea metabolism works. Processes that would be constantly active in surface animals are throttled back or only activated when necessary. This slow metabolism affects growth as well. Many deep-sea organisms grow at a glacial pace. It can take years to reach sizes that surface species achieve in months. But slow growth has advantages. It reduces energy demand, lowers nutritional requirements, and results in tissues that are built for longevity rather than rapid turnover. When food is unpredictable, rushing development is a risky gamble. Reproduction is also shaped by metabolic restraint, but the key here is timing. Energy for producing offspring is not spent casually. It is saved, sometimes for long periods, until conditions are favorable enough to justify the expense. In the deep sea, reproduction is an investment strategy, not an impulse purchase. Even digestion reflects this slow and steady philosophy. When a deep-sea animal does find food, it does not waste the opportunity. Digestion can be prolonged, extracting as much usable energy as possible from whatever was consumed. Nothing is rushed. Calories are treated like rare artifacts rather than disposable fuel. Darkness plays a crucial role in all of this. Without light, there is no daily cycle pushing organisms into active and resting phases. No sunrise signaling feeding time, no sunset triggering rest. Instead, metabolic rhythms are internally regulated, responding to food availability and environmental cues that have nothing to do with time of day. Life down here runs on opportunity-based scheduling. Another important factor is body temperature. The deep ocean is cold, and colder environments naturally slow chemical reactions. This further reduces metabolic demands, and deep-sea organisms are not fighting their environment to stay active. They lean into it. cold becomes an ally, helping stretch energy reserves even further. What is fascinating is how this metabolic strategy influences behavior. Deep-sea animals are often remarkably still. They do not move unless there is a reason. Motion is purposeful, not habitual. This is not because they cannot move quickly if needed, but because unnecessary movement burns energy that might be desperately needed later. It is the biological equivalent of not pacing when you are low on battery. This approach also changes how deep-sea ecosystems function as a whole. Interactions are less frequent, slower, and more deliberate. Encounters between animals are rare. When they do happen, they matter. There is no room for wasteful conflict or constant competition. The entire system runs on minimal throughput. To a surface-dwelling observer, this can make the deep sea seem lifeless or empty. In reality, it is simply operating on a different timescale. Life is not absent. It is waiting. It is conserving. It is enduring. From an evolutionary standpoint, slow metabolism is not a compromise. It is a finely tuned adaptation to scarcity. Species that burned energy too quickly did not last. Those that learned to stretch, save, and pause became the dominant forms of life in the deep. So when you imagine the deep ocean as a place where nothing happens, remember this: things are happening, just very slowly. Down here, survival is not about who eats the most or moves the fastest. It is about who can wait the longest without starving, who can make one meal last an impressively long time, and who understands that sometimes the smartest move is to do absolutely nothing at all. In a place where sunlight never arrives, light becomes a valuable currency. You cannot borrow it from the environment, you cannot wait for it to show up, and you definitely cannot turn on a lamp. So some deep-sea animals did the only reasonable thing. They started making their own. Bioluminescence is one of the most striking features of the deep ocean, and also one of the most misunderstood. It is not decorative. It is not there to look pretty for documentary cameras. It is a tool, refined by evolution, that solves multiple problems at once. In a world built on darkness, light becomes language, camouflage, weapon, and trap, depending on how you use it. At its core, bioluminescence is chemistry doing something flashy. Specialized molecules inside an organism react in a way that releases energy as visible light rather than heat. This process is incredibly efficient. Almost all of the energy goes into producing light, which is important when energy itself is a limited resource. Wasting calories on glow effects would be a terrible life decision otherwise. What makes deep-sea bioluminescence especially fascinating is how diverse its uses are. Some animals use light to find food. Others use it to avoid becoming food. And some use it to communicate in ways that only make sense in total darkness. One of the cleverest tricks is counter-illumination. In the deep ocean, faint light from above can silhouette animals swimming below it. Predators looking upward see dark shapes against a slightly lighter background. To solve this problem, some animals produce light on their undersides that matches the brightness of the water above. The result is a perfectly blended invisibility cloak. From below, they vanish. It is camouflage achieved by glowing, which feels deeply unfair, but extremely effective. Then there are animals that use bioluminescence as bait. Instead of chasing prey, they let curiosity do the work. A small, flickering light in the darkness looks like food, movement, or opportunity. Unsuspecting animals approach, and the hunter reveals itself at the last possible moment. It is the biological equivalent of luring someone in with a free sample and then charging them their entire existence. Bioluminescence is also used defensively. Some animals release clouds of glowing material when threatened, creating a visual distraction. In the sudden burst of light, her predators lose track of their target, giving the glowing escape artist a chance to disappear into the dark. Think of it as throwing a flashbang and leaving the scene quietly while everyone is confused. Communication is another major function. In the absence of sound-friendly conditions and visible landmarks, light becomes a way to signal identity. Species-specific patterns, colors, and rhythms allow animals to recognize one another. A particular blink sequence might say, "I am not food," or "I am food but only socially," or "I am definitely the correct species and not a terrible mistake." Some deep-sea animals outsource their light production entirely. Instead of making light themselves, they host glowing bacteria inside specialized organs. These bacteria are fed and protected, and in return, they produce a steady glow. It is a symbiotic relationship where everyone benefits, and no one asks awkward questions about the electricity bill. The placement of light-producing organs is never random. Lights appear on lures, bellies, sides, and even inside mouths. Each location serves a specific purpose. A glow near the head can attract prey. Lights along the body can break up an outline. Internal light can illuminate prey during capture. Every glow has a job. What is remarkable is how precisely these systems are controlled. Many animals can turn their light on and off, adjust brightness, or change patterns. This is not a constant glow like a forgotten porch light. It is deliberate, responsive, and context-aware. Light is used only when it is useful, because unnecessary glowing would attract the wrong kind of attention. From an evolutionary perspective, bioluminescence represents a shift in how organisms interact with their environment. Instead of reacting to external light, they generate their own signals and reshape the darkness around them. They do not wait for conditions to improve. They create the conditions they need, one photon at a time. To human eyes, bioluminescence feels magical, like something borrowed from science fiction. But in the deep sea, it is just another adaptation, another clever workaround, another reminder that when life is denied a fundamental resource, it does not give up. It improvises. So the next time you see footage of glowing creatures drifting through the abyss, remember this: those lights are not there for beauty. They are tools honed by darkness itself. In a world with no sun, the ability to glow is not a novelty, and it is survival with the flair for dramatic lighting. When we think about survival, vision often feels non-negotiable. Seeing predators, spotting food, recognizing allies, avoiding walls. Eyes are one of evolution's favorite tools, and on the surface, they are everywhere. But take away light entirely, and vision faces an identity crisis. In the deep sea, eyes had two choices: adapt in extreme ways or quietly step aside. Some organisms doubled down on vision. If light was going to be rare, then every stray photon mattered. These species evolved enormous eyes relative to their body size, designed to capture even the faintest glimmers. Their eyes are shaped to maximize sensitivity, gathering light the way satellite dishes gather signals. It is less about clarity and more about detection. Sharp images are a luxury, and knowing that something moved is enough. These massive eyes often dominate the head, pushing other features aside. Retina become packed with light-sensitive cells tuned to the specific wavelengths that penetrate deepest into the ocean. Color vision becomes less important. In fact, Distinguishing colours is largely pointless when nearly everything is some variation of black. Instead, contrast and motion take priority. If it moves or glows, it matters. But giant eyes are expensive. They require energy to build, maintain, and protect. In an environment where calories are precious, investing heavily in vision only makes sense if vision provides reliable information. For many deep-sea organisms, it does not. Light is simply too rare, too unpredictable, or too misleading to justify the cost. And that is where the second evolutionary strategy comes in. Give up. Some deep-sea animals have reduced eyes, vestigial eyes, or no eyes at all. This is not a failure or a regression. It is optimization. If vision does not improve survival, then it is dead weight. Maintaining complex sensory organs that provide little benefit is like paying rent on an apartment you never visit. By abandoning vision, these organisms free up energy for other systems. Sensory processing shifts toward touch, chemical detection, and mechanical cues. Instead of seeing the world, they feel it. Instead of watching for movement, they detect vibrations, pressure changes, or chemical traces drifting through the water. Information still flows in, just through different channels. For some species, eyes are present but highly specialized. Rather than forming images, these eyes function more like light meters. They detect brightness changes without resolving shapes. This allows animals to sense bioluminescent flashes or silhouettes without the burden of full visual processing. It is the sensory equivalent of knowing someone turned on a light without caring what the room looks like. There is also an important psychological shift here, if we can use that word loosely. Surface animals rely heavily on visual cues to make decisions. Deep-sea animals that abandon vision operate in a world where certainty is rare. They do not react to what they see, but to what they detect indirectly. Their behavior is shaped by probability rather than observation. Movement is cautious. Responses are measured. Acting on incomplete information is simply part of life. The absence of vision also influences brain structure. Visual processing centers can shrink or disappear, while regions associated with other senses expand. This is not degeneration. It is specialization. Brains become tailored to the information that actually exists in the environment, rather than wasting resources on processing data that never arrives. Interestingly, losing eyes can also reduce vulnerability. Eyes are delicate. They can be damaged, infected, or injured. In a dark world filled with abrasive particles and close-quarters encounters, eliminating fragile organs reduces risk. No eyes means nothing to poke, scratch, or blind. It is a brutally practical solution. From an evolutionary standpoint, this divergence in eye strategies highlights an important truth. Adaptation is not about complexity. It is about usefulness. Sometimes the most advanced solution is to simplify, or to let go of features that no longer serve a purpose. So the deep sea gives us a spectrum. At one end, creatures with enormous, light-hungry eyes, scanning the darkness for any hint of activity. At the other, creatures that have decided vision is overrated and built their lives around other senses entirely. Both strategies work. Both are successful. Neither is objectively better. In the end, the deep ocean does not care how you perceive it. It only cares whether your perception helps you survive. And in a place where darkness reigns supreme, sometimes the smartest thing an eye can do is quietly fade away and let the rest of the body take over. When you live in a world where light is unreliable or non-existent, information has to come from somewhere else. In the deep ocean, that somewhere else is the water itself. Every movement and every disturbance, every unfortunate flail sends ripples through the surrounding fluid, and deep-sea animals have become masters at reading those ripples like a detailed newsfeed of everything happening nearby. Water is an excellent messenger. It transmits vibrations, pressure changes, and low-frequency sounds far better than air. In the deep sea, where the environment is relatively stable and quiet, even tiny disturbances stand out. A struggling animal, a drifting object, a slow approach, all leave signatures in the water. To the right sensory system, these signals are as obvious as flashing lights. Many deep-sea animals possess highly sensitive mechanoreceptors, specialized cells that detect minute changes in water movement. These receptors are often arranged along the body in lines or patches, creating a sensory map of the surrounding space. Instead of seeing the world, these animals feel it in real time, detecting motion, direction, and distance based on how the water flows across them. Pressure detection is especially important, because pressure in the deep sea is immense but stable. Even slight deviations can be meaningful. A moving organism displaces water, creating micro-pressure gradients that ripple outward. Deep-sea animals can sense these gradients and determine where the disturbance originated. It is less like hearing a sound and more like feeling a presence. This ability allows animals to detect prey, predators, and obstacles without ever making contact. A subtle vibration might indicate a potential meal drifting closer. A sudden pressure shift could signal danger. And information arrives early enough to respond calmly rather than react in panic. In an environment where energy conservation matters, early detection is everything. Some species take this sensitivity to extremes. Their sensory systems are tuned to such low thresholds that they can detect movements from remarkable distances. What feels like empty water to us is, to them, a dynamic landscape filled with signals. The ocean is never truly still. It hums quietly with information, and deep-sea animals are excellent listeners. These sensory systems also provide spatial awareness. By comparing signals received on different parts of the body, animals can determine the direction and speed of moving objects. This allows for precise orientation without vision. Movement becomes a calculated response rather than a blind guess. It is navigation by physics rather than sight. Vibration sensing is particularly useful for detecting struggling prey. Movements caused by panic or exertion produce irregular, high-information signals that stand out against the background. Calm drifting, by contrast, generates minimal disturbance. This creates an interesting feedback loop. The more something struggles, the more visible it becomes in a sensory sense. Down here, panic is loud. Pressure and vibration detection also help animals avoid collisions in the dark. Large objects moving through water create broad pressure waves that can be sensed well in advance. This allows animals to adjust their position gently, rather than making sudden, costly movements. Grace replaces urgency. What makes these systems even more impressive is their integration with the nervous system. Signals are processed quickly but efficiently. The goal is not to analyze every detail, but to extract just enough information to make the right decision. Is this worth investigating? Is it a threat? Can it be ignored? The deep sea rewards correct answers, not fast ones. There is also a fascinating side effect to relying on these senses. Deep sea animals become incredibly aware of their own movements. Every twitch sends information into the environment. This encourages slow, deliberate behavior. Sudden motion is not just energetically expensive, it is communicative. It announces your presence to everything nearby. Stillness becomes a form of stealth. From an evolutionary perspective, these sensory systems reflect a shift in priorities. Instead of investing heavily in organs that interpret distant visual cues, as deep sea life invests in direct physical awareness of the surrounding medium. The water is not just a place to exist. It is a sensory interface. To us, this might feel alien. We are visually oriented creatures, uncomfortable without sight. But for deep-sea animals, feeling the world through pressure and vibration is perfectly natural. It provides reliable information in an environment where light lies or disappears entirely. So when you imagine the deep ocean as silent and empty, remember that it is neither. It is filled with subtle signals, quiet movements, and constant communication through water. And somewhere in that darkness, an animal is calmly interpreting a ripple you would never notice, reacting to a shrimp sneeze that happened far, far away. Finding food in the deep sea is less like grocery shopping and more like winning a very slow, very unfair lottery. Meals are unpredictable, widely spaced, and rarely generous. There are no lush fields of prey, no constant swarms to chase. Instead, food appears sporadically, drifting, wandering, or blundering into the wrong place at the wrong time. This has shaped feeding strategies that range from deeply unsettling to impressively patient. One common approach is ambush predation. Speed is not the priority here. Surprise is. Many deep-sea predators remain motionless for long periods, blending into the darkness and conserving energy. Their bodies are built to wait. When prey comes close enough, the attack is sudden and decisive. There is no prolonged chase, no dramatic pursuit, just one fast movement. And the opportunity is either seized or lost. To make this strategy work, many ambush predators have evolved disproportionately large mouths and expandable jaws. When food is rare, being picky is a terrible strategy. If something edible wanders by, you take it, even if it barely fits. Some deep-sea predators can swallow prey nearly as large as themselves, stretching tissues and dislocating joints in ways that would horrify an orthopedic surgeon. The logic is simple. You may not eat again for a long time, so when you do, make it count. Then there are predators that rely on attraction rather than surprise. Instead of hiding completely, they advertise. Using movement, chemical cues, or light displays, they draw prey in close. This is particularly effective in an environment where curiosity can override caution. When the darkness is absolute, and any signal stands out. And once prey crosses the invisible line into striking distance, the outcome is rarely in their favor. Not all deep-sea feeders are hunters. Some take a more passive approach, letting the environment deliver food to them. Filter feeders are the epitome of patience. They position themselves in areas where water movement brings a steady, if minimal, flow of particles. Tiny bits of organic material, microorganisms, and detritus are captured and consumed over time. It is not exciting, but it is reliable. This strategy requires structures designed to trap and process microscopic food efficiently. Fine meshes, sticky surfaces, and specialized appendages help collect particles that would otherwise pass unnoticed. Each individual particle provides very little energy, but over long periods, the accumulation adds up. One, it is slow dining for a slow world. Scavenging is another important feeding strategy. When something large dies in the ocean above, its remains eventually sink. These rare events create sudden windfalls. Deep-sea scavengers are often highly mobile compared to other organisms, capable of detecting chemical signals from great distances. When a carcass arrives, they converge quickly, consuming as much as possible before it disappears. Scavengers are built for efficiency rather than elegance. Strong jaws, expandable stomachs, and robust digestive systems allow them to process large amounts of food rapidly. This feast or famine lifestyle favors animals that can capitalize fully on rare opportunities. There is no social etiquette here. When food shows up, it is a free-for-all. Some deep-sea animals blur the lines between feeding strategies. Almost they may scavenge when the opportunity arises, filter feed when conditions allow, and ambush prey if something wanders too close. Flexibility is valuable when the environment is unpredictable. Being locked into a single feeding mode is risky when your next meal might arrive weeks or months from now. What all these strategies have in common is efficiency. There is no wasted motion, no unnecessary effort. Deep-sea animals are not interested in flashy hunting techniques. They want results with minimal energy expenditure. Success is measured not by how often you eat, but by how long you can survive between meals. From an evolutionary perspective, feeding strategies in the deep sea reveal how scarcity shapes behavior. On the surface, abundance allows specialization and excess. In the depths, scarcity enforces restraint, and every adaptation is a response to limited resources. To us, these feeding methods can seem extreme or unsettling. Nightmare smiles, distended stomachs, slow-motion vacuuming of invisible crumbs. But in the deep ocean, they are perfectly reasonable solutions. Life down here is not about comfort or elegance. It is about being ready, being patient, and making absolutely sure that when food finally arrives, you do not let it slip away. Reproduction in the deep sea comes with a problem that makes awkward first dates look charming by comparison. When individuals are spread thin across vast, dark expanses of water, simply finding another member of your species can be the greatest challenge of your entire life. There are no meeting spots, no seasonal gatherings, no convenient signals that say, others like you are nearby. And yet, our species persist, which means reproduction had to get creative. In environments where encounters are rare, chance meetings cannot be wasted. Many deep-sea species evolved strategies that prioritize certainty over romance. When you finally find a compatible partner, the goal is not to impress them. It is to make sure they never leave. One of the most extreme solutions to this problem is permanent attachment. In certain species, individuals fuse their bodies together once they meet, forming a lifelong reproductive unit. This is not metaphorical bonding. This is literal, physical integration. Tissues merge. Circulatory systems connect. Two organisms become one cooperative structure, ensuring that reproduction can occur whenever conditions allow. From an evolutionary standpoint, this strategy makes brutal sense. If finding a mate is unlikely, and then losing one is unacceptable, permanent attachment eliminates the risk entirely. There is no need to search again. No need to coordinate timing. The reproductive partnership is always present, always ready. Other species solve the rarity problem by releasing reproductive cells into the water, relying on sheer numbers and timing rather than direct contact. This broadcast approach depends on synchronized release, increasing the odds that cells from different individuals will meet. While this might sound inefficient, It avoids the need for physical encounters altogether. When individuals are widely dispersed, letting the ocean do the matchmaking can be surprisingly effective. Some deep-sea organisms hedge their bets by combining strategies. They may reproduce both through direct contact and through broadcast methods, depending on environmental conditions. Flexibility increases the chances that at least some offspring will be produced, even when circumstances are unfavorable. Energy investment in reproduction is also carefully controlled. Producing offspring is costly, and in the deep sea, wasted energy can be fatal. Many species produce fewer offspring, but invest more resources into each one. The goal is not quantity, but quality. Offspring need to be robust enough to survive long developmental periods in a harsh environment. Development itself is often slow. Eggs and larvae may drift for extended periods before settling into suitable habitats. This dispersal helps spread populations across large areas, reducing competition and increasing the likelihood that some individuals will encounter favorable conditions. It is a long-term strategy built around patience rather than immediacy. Chemical communication plays a crucial role as well. In the absence of reliable visual cues, chemical signals help individuals recognize compatible partners. These signals can travel long distances in water, acting as invisible beacons. When one individual detects the chemical signature of another, it can orient itself accordingly, increasing the chance of a successful encounter. What is particularly fascinating is how these reproductive strategies influence body design and behavior. In species where permanent attachment occurs, individuals may be highly specialized for their reproductive role. Structures that are unnecessary for survival after attachment may be reduced or repurposed. The body becomes optimized for a shared existence rather than independent life. So, from a human perspective, these strategies can seem extreme, even unsettling. But they are logical responses to a simple problem. How do you reproduce when you might only meet one suitable partner in your entire lifetime? The deep sea answers this question with ruthless efficiency. There is no room for indecision, no luxury of choice. Reproduction is treated as a rare opportunity that must be secured permanently or maximized through probability. Romance is replaced by reliability. And yet, these strategies work. Populations persist. Lineages continue. Life finds a way to reproduce, even when the odds seem impossibly low. So while permanent attachment might sound like the worst dating outcome imaginable, in the deep sea it is not a failure. It is a triumph of adaptation. When the darkness makes encounters rare, evolution does not complain, and it simply ensures that once two individuals meet, they never have to search again. Beneath the dramatic body shapes and eerie behaviors of deep-sea creatures lies an even stranger story, one written in chemistry rather than anatomy. The true battle for survival in the deep ocean happens at the molecular level, where proteins, enzymes, and blood chemistry must function under conditions that would completely break their surface world counterparts. Cold temperatures, immense pressure, and limited resources force life to re-engineer its internal toolkit from the inside out. Start with proteins, the workhorses of biology. Proteins fold into precise three-dimensional shapes, and those shapes determine what they do. On the surface, these structures are stable within a narrow range of temperature and pressure. Change those conditions too much, and proteins lose their shape, becoming useless. In the deep sea, those surface rules do not apply. Deep-sea organisms produce pressure-resistant proteins, sometimes called piezophilic proteins, that remain stable under immense force. Their molecular structures are more flexible, allowing them to function without snapping into useless configurations. Instead of rigid folding, they adopt designs that tolerate compression. It is the molecular equivalent of building furniture out of rubber instead of glass. Enzymes, which are specialized proteins that drive chemical reactions, are particularly sensitive to environmental conditions. In the deep sea, enzymes must operate efficiently in cold temperatures and under crushing pressure. To achieve this, deep-sea enzymes often have looser structures, allowing them to move and interact even when conditions would normally slow reactions to a crawl. This keeps essential processes running without requiring extra energy. Now add cold to the equation. The deep ocean is not just dark and pressurized. It is cold, often hovering just above freezing. Cold slows chemical reactions and increases the risk of internal fluids freezing. To counter this, many deep-sea organisms produce antifreeze molecules. These compounds prevent ice crystals from forming inside tissues, protecting cells from damage. Unlike the antifreeze you put in a car, biological antifreeze works by interfering with the growth of ice crystals, rather than lowering the freezing point dramatically. These molecules bind to tiny ice formations and stop them from expanding, thus ensuring that fluids remain usable even in near-freezing conditions. It is a subtle but highly effective solution to a potentially lethal problem. Blood chemistry also changes in response to deep-sea conditions. Oxygen transport becomes more complex when temperatures are low and metabolic rates are slow. Some deep-sea animals have blood pigments that bind oxygen more efficiently under these conditions, ensuring that tissues receive what they need even when oxygen levels fluctuate. These pigments can behave very differently from human hemoglobin. Their structure and binding properties are tuned to the deep sea's specific environment. This allows oxygen to be released where it is needed without being wasted. In a world where every resource matters, even oxygen delivery gets optimized. Pressure also affects cell membranes, which must remain fluid to function properly. High pressure and low temperature both tend to stiffen membranes, making it harder for substances to move in and out of cells. Deep-sea organisms adjust the composition of their membranes, incorporating different types of molecules that keep them flexible. This ensures that communication between cells continues smoothly. All of these chemical adaptations are finely balanced. Remove a deep-sea organism from its environment, and that balance collapses. Proteins designed to function under pressure may lose their shape without it. Enzymes optimized for cold may become unstable at higher temperatures. Antifreeze molecules become unnecessary or disruptive. In other words, these creatures are chemically specialized for a world we cannot replicate easily. This is why deep-sea life is so difficult to study in laboratory settings. Bringing organisms to the surface often damages them at a molecular level long before any visible changes occur. Their chemistry expects pressure, cold, and stability. Take those away, and the internal machinery struggles to cope. From an evolutionary perspective, these chemical adaptations represent some of the most fundamental changes life can make. They are not superficial tweaks. They are deep modifications to the core processes that keep cells alive, and they highlight just how flexible biology can be when faced with extreme constraints. So when you imagine deep-sea creatures as bizarre shapes drifting through darkness, remember that their strangest features may be invisible. Their blood, their proteins, and their enzymes are all quietly doing impossible chemistry, performing reactions that would fall apart at the surface. In the deep sea, survival is written in molecules, and those molecules are perfectly happy exactly where they are. If the rest of the deep sea feels alien, hydrothermal vents feel like a different planet entirely. These are places where the ocean floor cracks open and releases superheated, chemical-rich fluids into the freezing dark. The water pouring out of vents can be hot enough to melt lead, laced with substances that would be instantly fatal to most surface life. And yet, these vents are surrounded by dense, bustling communities of organisms, not in spite of the toxicity, but because of it. Hydrothermal vents exist along tectonic boundaries, where seawater seeps into cracks in the Earth's crust, heats up, thus reacts with minerals, and then erupts back into the ocean. This vent fluid is rich in chemicals like hydrogen sulfide, which smells like rotten eggs and is toxic to humans. In most environments, that would be the end of the story. Here, it is the beginning of a food web. The key to vent ecosystems is chemosynthesis. Instead of relying on sunlight to power food production, specialized microorganisms use chemical energy. They oxidize hydrogen sulfide and other compounds, converting chemical potential into usable energy. These microbes are the foundation of the entire vent community. They do the same job plants do on the surface, just with a much more aggressive ingredient list. Many larger vent animals form close partnerships with these microbes. Instead of eating in the traditional sense, they house chemosynthetic bacteria inside their bodies. The animals provide a stable environment and access to chemicals from the vent fluid. The bacteria produce energy-rich compounds that feed their hosts. It is an internal farm powered by toxins. This arrangement allows animals to grow large and thrive in a place where conventional food is scarce or non-existent. Entire ecosystems bloom around vents, fueled by chemistry rather than light. These communities can be surprisingly dense, with life packed tightly around the vent openings, like moths around a very dangerous flame. But vent environments are unstable. Vents can shut down, shift position, or change chemical output over time. This means vent life must be adaptable. Some species can relocate, while others produce offspring capable of dispersing to new vents. And survival depends on the ability to find and colonize these fleeting habitats before they disappear. Temperature gradients around vents are extreme. A few centimeters can mean the difference between freezing cold and scalding heat. Vent organisms occupy very specific zones, balancing exposure to chemical-rich fluids with tolerable temperatures. It is a delicate dance, one wrong move away from being boiled or starved. What makes vent ecosystems especially fascinating is how disconnected they are from the surface world. They do not depend on falling organic material or sunlight-driven productivity. They are powered from below by the Earth itself. This challenges our assumptions about where life can exist and what it needs to survive. From an evolutionary perspective, a hydrothermal vents may resemble some of the earliest habitats where life originated on Earth. Chemical energy, mineral surfaces, and stable conditions deep below the surface could have provided the right ingredients for life to begin. Studying vent communities offers clues about how life might arise in similar environments elsewhere. And this is where things get truly exciting. Moons like Europa and Enceladus, with their subsurface oceans and potential hydrothermal activity, suddenly seem less hypothetical as homes for life. If life can thrive around vents on Earth, powered by chemistry alone, then darkness and distance from a star may not be barriers at all. Despite their harshness, vent ecosystems are surprisingly efficient. Energy is cycled rapidly through microbial communities, supporting larger organisms and complex interactions. Some predation, competition, and cooperation all exist here, just under conditions that would make surface life give up immediately. So when we say life finds a way, hydrothermal vents are one of the strongest arguments. They show that life does not require gentle conditions or familiar energy sources. It will happily build entire ecosystems around poison and heat, as long as the chemistry works. In the deep sea, hydrothermal vents stand as glowing reminders that habitability is a flexible concept. If there is energy to be harvested, life will show up, unpack its molecular tools, and get to work. No parking sign, or not. In the deep sea, nothing goes to waste. When something large dies near the surface, Its body begins a slow descent into the darkness, drifting downward like an unplanned delivery from the world above. As by the time it reaches the seafloor, it has become one of the most important events in the deep ocean. Not a tragedy, but a resource. A falling carcass is not an ending here. It is a beginning. These arrivals are rare, unpredictable, and enormously valuable. Large bodies represent concentrated energy in an environment where energy is usually scattered and scarce. When one lands on the seafloor, it creates what scientists often describe as a temporary ecosystem. For deep-sea life, it is a sudden city popping into existence, complete with food, shelter, and opportunity. The first to arrive are usually mobile scavengers. They detect chemical signals released by the decaying body and converge from surrounding areas. These early arrivals tear into soft tissues, consuming as much as possible while the opportunity lasts. Thus, speed matters in this initial phase. The sooner you arrive, the larger your share. As the carcass is consumed, different communities take over. Microorganisms begin breaking down remaining tissues, releasing nutrients into the surrounding sediment and water. This microbial activity attracts smaller organisms that feed on bacteria or organic-rich material. The buffet shifts from large bites to microscopic dining. Over time, even bones and tough tissues become resources. Specialized organisms can extract nutrients from materials that would seem useless to most animals. The carcass continues to support life long after its original form has disappeared. What started as one organism becomes fuel for many. This process highlights an important feature of deep-sea ecosystems. Recycling is not optional. With so few inputs of new energy, everything must be reused efficiently. Death is not a disruption. It is an integral part of the system. Nutrients are passed along, transformed, and redistributed, ensuring that energy remains in circulation. These temporary ecosystems also create hotspots of biodiversity. Species that might rarely encounter one another gather around a shared resource. Interactions occur that would not happen otherwise. Competition, cooperation, and opportunism all play out in a condensed space. For a brief time, the deep sea becomes crowded. The duration of these events varies. Some carcasses are consumed quickly, leaving little behind. Others persist for years, continuing to support life in different forms. The exact timeline depends on size, location, and environmental conditions, but regardless of duration, the impact is significant. From an evolutionary perspective, the ability to exploit these rare resources has shaped many deep-sea species. Those that can detect carcasses, arrive efficiently, and utilize a wide range of materials gain a survival advantage. Flexibility and opportunism are rewarded. These events also influence the surrounding environment. Nutrients released from decomposition enrich sediments and water, affecting local productivity. Even after the visible remains are gone, the chemical footprint lingers, supporting life in subtle ways. To human sensibilities, this might seem grim. The idea of entire communities thriving on death can feel unsettling. But in the deep sea, it is simply practical. There is no moral weight attached to a carcass. It is just energy changing hands. This relentless efficiency challenges how we think about ecosystems. And on the surface, we often separate life and death conceptually. In the deep sea, they are inseparable. Death fuels life directly, without delay or ceremony. So when something large sinks into the abyss, it does not vanish. It becomes a focal point, a gathering place, a brief moment of abundance in a world defined by scarcity. The deep sea does not mourn. it recycles. And in doing so, it keeps life moving forward, one falling body at a time. Every now and then, footage from the deep sea surfaces showing a creature that looks oddly familiar, except for one detail. It is enormous, not in a dramatic, monster movie way, but in a quiet, unsettling way that makes you wonder if someone bumped the size slider during creation and never put it back. This phenomenon, known as deep-sea gigantism, is one of the most curious outcomes of life evolving under darkness and pressure. Deep-sea gigantism refers to the tendency for some species living in deep waters to grow much larger than their shallow water relatives. Crabs, isopods, worms, and other invertebrates can reach sizes that seem wildly out of proportion compared to what we see near the surface. These are not aggressive giants charging through the abyss. They are slow-moving, deliberate creatures, carrying their bulk like a long-term commitment. The reasons behind gigantism are complex, but they all tie back to the unique constraints of the deep sea. One major factor is slow metabolism paired with long lifespans. When growth happens gradually over extended periods, size can accumulate without requiring large bursts of energy. Instead of growing quickly and stopping early, our deep-sea organisms often grow steadily for years, sometimes decades. Larger size offers several advantages in this environment. A bigger body can store more energy, which is invaluable when meals are infrequent. Fat reserves, muscle mass, and internal storage act as buffers against starvation. When food arrives unpredictably, having extra capacity can mean the difference between surviving a long gap or running out of resources. Size also reduces vulnerability to predators. In a place where encounters are rare but potentially fatal, being too large to be easily consumed is a strong defensive strategy. While no size offers complete protection, larger animals are less likely to be targeted by opportunistic predators looking for easy meals. Another advantage of large size is efficiency. Bigger bodies lose energy more slowly than smaller ones. Yet heat, nutrients, and chemical gradients are retained longer, which is beneficial in cold, energy-limited environments. This makes larger organisms more metabolically economical over long timescales, even if they are not particularly active. Environmental stability also plays a role. The deep sea experiences fewer rapid changes than surface environments. Temperature, light, and conditions remain relatively constant. This stability allows organisms to adopt long-term growth strategies without the risk of sudden environmental shifts disrupting development. Slow and steady becomes a viable path. However, gigantism does not occur everywhere or in every group. It appears selectively, depending on how species interact with their environment. Not all deep-sea animals benefit from growing large. For some, a smaller size offers advantages in mobility, hiding, or reproduction. Gigantism is not a universal rule, but a context-dependent outcome. What makes deep-sea gigantism particularly interesting is how understated it is. These are not fast, dominant giants. They are often gentle, slow-moving, and surprisingly fragile-looking despite their size. Their movements are careful, their behavior measured. Size here is not about dominance, it is about endurance. From an evolutionary standpoint, gigantism reflects how constraints shape outcomes. When energy is scarce, but time is abundant, growing slowly and living long becomes an effective strategy. Instead of racing through life, deep-sea giants take their time, accumulating mass, one careful step at a time. To human observers, these creatures can feel uncanny, familiar shapes stretched into unfamiliar scales, a reminder that size alone does not determine power or aggression. In the deep sea, being big is not about chasing or conquering, it is about lasting. So when you see a massive deep-sea invertebrate drifting calmly through the darkness, remember that its size is not an accident. It is the result of patience, efficiency, and a world where growing slowly is not a disadvantage. In the deep ocean, sometimes the biggest creatures are simply the ones that had the time to keep growing, while everyone else was waiting for the next meal. Time behaves strangely in the deep sea, not in a science fiction sense, but in a biological one. Without sunlight to mark days, without seasons to divide years, our life settles into a rhythm that feels almost detached from the ticking clock we experience on the surface. For many deep-sea creatures, time stretches out, unhurried and forgiving, allowing lives to unfold at a pace that would seem impossible anywhere else. Longevity is a defining feature of many deep-sea organisms. Some species live for decades, others for centuries. This is not because they possess magical anti-aging powers, but because their environment encourages a lifestyle where everything happens slowly. Growth, movement, reproduction, and even cellular turnover are all drawn out. Aging does not stop, but it slows, like a line at a government office that everyone has collectively agreed not to rush. One reason for this extended lifespan is reduced metabolic stress. When bodies burn energy slowly, they produce fewer damaging byproducts that contribute to cellular wear. Chemical reactions still occur, but at a calmer pace. Cells are not constantly repairing damage from high activity. Over time, this translates into slower aging at the biological level. Environmental stability also plays a crucial role. The deep sea is remarkably consistent. Temperatures remain cold and steady. Conditions do not fluctuate wildly from one year to the next. This reduces the need for rapid adaptation and emergency responses that can shorten lifespan. When the world around you rarely surprises you, your body can afford to plan for the long term. Many deep-sea animals grow slowly throughout their lives, rather than reaching a fixed adult size quickly. This ongoing growth spreads energy investment over many years, avoiding the strain of rapid development. It also means that age and size are not always closely linked. An individual may appear mature while still having decades of life ahead. Reproductive timing reflects this long view as well. Instead of reproducing early and often, many deep-sea species delay reproduction until conditions are favorable. This patience reduces risk. Investing in offspring only when the chances of survival are higher makes sense in an environment where energy is limited and opportunities are rare. The absence of daily light cycles also changes how biological clocks operate. Many deep-sea animals lack the circadian rhythms that govern sleep and activity in surface species. Instead of being tied to a 24-hour cycle, their activity patterns are driven by internal states and environmental cues unrelated to time of day, and life becomes event-driven rather than schedule-driven. This altered relationship with time affects behavior. Deep-sea animals do not rush. There is no evolutionary pressure to be constantly active. Movement is deliberate. Responses are measured. Acting too quickly or too often wastes energy and increases risk. Stillness is not inactivity. It is strategy. From an evolutionary perspective, longevity is rewarded in environments where reproduction opportunities are infrequent. Living longer increases the chance of encountering favorable conditions. A long life is not just about survival. It is about maximizing the number of chances you get to succeed. To us, this lifestyle can feel alien. We are used to fast growth, frequent activity, and short attention spans. The deep sea offers a different model, one where success is measured over decades and not days, where patience is not a virtue, but a necessity. This slow approach also influences how deep-sea ecosystems change over time. Populations respond gradually to environmental shifts. Recovery from disturbances takes longer, but so does collapse. The system is resilient in a quiet, understated way. So when you imagine deep-sea creatures drifting through the darkness, think of them as inhabitants of a stretched-out timeline. They are not in a hurry. They are not racing toward anything. They are simply existing, steadily and persistently, in a world where time moves differently. In the deep ocean, aging does not charge in loudly. It waits. It watches. And it only moves forward when everything else does too. Sunlight is one of the most powerful shaping forces in biology. It drives photosynthesis, structures ecosystems, and dictates daily rhythms for much of life on Earth. So when organisms move into an environment where sunlight never reaches, evolution is forced to make hard choices. Living without light is not just about surviving darkness. It is about deciding which traits are no longer worth carrying and which new ones must take their place. One of the first things to go is dependence on photosynthesis. In sunlit ecosystems, photosynthesis is the foundation of food webs. Plants and algae convert light into chemical energy, and everything else feeds off that base. In the deep sea, that option disappears entirely. There is no light to harvest, no leaves to unfurl, no solar budget to manage. Instead, life turns to chemistry. Chemical energy becomes the new currency. Rather than relying on light-driven reactions, her deep-sea life exploits chemical gradients, organic matter, and compounds released from geological processes. This shift is not a minor adjustment. It changes how ecosystems are structured and how energy moves through them. Food webs become detached from the surface, relying on sources that are local, sporadic, or internally generated. With sunlight gone, many traits associated with light-based living lose their usefulness. Pigmentation, for example, becomes less important. Bright colors, patterns, and displays that matter in well-lit environments offer little advantage in total darkness. Maintaining pigments requires energy, and if no one can see them, that energy is better spent elsewhere. As a result, many deep-sea organisms appear pale, translucent, or uniformly dark. Visual signaling also loses its role. Courtship displays and territorial warnings and other visual cues fade away. Communication shifts toward other channels. This leads to the loss or reduction of structures designed for display and the gain of systems better suited for non-visual interaction. But while some traits are lost, others are gained or amplified. Sensory systems not dependent on light become more refined. Chemical detection, mechanical awareness, and internal regulation take center stage. Evolution does not simply strip features away, it reallocates resources. Another major trade-off involves behavior. In sunlit environments, speed and responsiveness are often critical. Light allows rapid detection and reaction. In darkness, reacting quickly to unreliable information can be costly. Deep-sea organisms tend to favor strategies that reduce unnecessary activity. And this means less emphasis on speed and more on endurance and efficiency. Body plans also shift. Structures that support fast, agile movement may be reduced, while features that enhance stability, storage, or flexibility are favored. The absence of light allows for more experimental forms, without the need to conform to visual expectations or aerodynamic constraints. Evolution explores designs that might seem strange by surface standards. The replacement of photosynthesis with chemical stubbornness also reshapes how life interacts with the environment. Instead of drawing energy from above, deep-sea ecosystems often draw it from below or from internal recycling. This creates systems that are more self-contained and less dependent on external input. It is a different philosophy of survival. These trade-offs highlight an important evolutionary principle. Adaptation is not about improvement in a general sense. It is about suitability. Traits that are advantageous in one environment can become liabilities in another. The deep sea does not reward beauty, speed, or brightness. It rewards efficiency, resilience, and the ability to make do with very little. From a broader perspective, this shift challenges how we define habitability. We tend to associate life with light, greenery, and warmth. The deep sea shows that these are preferences, not requirements. Life can thrive in darkness, powered by chemistry, as long as the fundamental rules of energy transfer are satisfied. So when life gave up sunlight, it did not fail, it adapted. It shed unnecessary features, embraced new strategies, and built ecosystems that function entirely out of sight. Photosynthesis was not replaced by something gentler or easier. It was replaced by determination at the molecular level. In the deep ocean, evolution is a story of trade-offs accepted and compromises perfected. What was lost was light. What was gained was a reminder that life does not need the sun's permission to exist. At first glance, surface life and deep sea life can feel like they come from entirely different planets. One is bright, fast, colourful, and noisy. The other is dark, slow, muted, and quiet. And yet, beneath these differences, the same fundamental biological rules apply. The same molecules build cells. The same genetic code directs development. The same evolutionary processes shape survival. The difference is not the blueprint. It is the environment that reads it. And on the surface, sunlight dominates everything. It structures ecosystems from the ground up. Plants and algae convert light into energy, forming the base of food webs. Life becomes layered vertically, from producers to consumers, with energy flowing in a predictable direction. This abundance of energy encourages rapid growth, frequent reproduction, and constant activity. Speed matters. Visibility matters. Being seen can be an advantage or a risk. In the deep sea, the absence of sunlight flips this logic. Energy is limited and irregular. There is no constant input powering growth. As a result, life becomes more conservative. Growth slows. Reproduction is delayed or carefully timed. Activity is reduced. Where surface life often races, deep life waits. These differences influence behavior in profound ways. Surface animals often rely on visual cues to navigate social interactions. Displays, signals, and territorial behaviors are common. Deep-sea animals, by contrast, operate with minimal visual feedback. Social structures tend to be simpler or more opportunistic. Encounters are rare, and interactions are often brief but significant. The same basic organs also evolve differently. Limbs designed for speed on the surface may become less prominent or repurposed in the deep. Structures that support endurance or stability take precedence. The skeletons, muscles, and tissues of surface animals are optimized for a world where movement is frequent and varied. Deep-sea forms reflect a world where movement is deliberate and costly. Even reproduction follows different philosophies. As surface species often produce many offspring, with relatively low investment in each, relying on numbers to ensure survival. In contrast, deep-sea species tend to invest more heavily in fewer offspring, reflecting the challenges of finding suitable conditions for development. The underlying biological processes are the same. The strategies diverge. Another key difference lies in how organisms interact with time. Surface life is synchronized with daily and seasonal cycles. Light cues drive behavior, migration, and growth. Deep life exists outside these rhythms. Time becomes less about external schedules and more about internal states and chance events. This leads to a slower, more flexible relationship with the passage of time. What is striking is that none of these differences require entirely new biology, as they emerge from adjustments to existing systems. Genes are regulated differently, developmental pathways are altered, traits are emphasized or diminished. Evolution works with what is available, reshaping rather than reinventing. This comparison highlights the adaptability of life. The same cellular machinery can support both a hummingbird burning energy at a furious pace and a deep-sea organism drifting calmly through darkness for decades. The difference is not capability, but context. It also challenges our intuition about what normal life looks like. We tend to judge biology through the lens of our own environment. Fast, visible, and active feels normal to us. But from a planetary perspective, the deep sea may be closer to the rule than the exception. Vast areas of Earth exist without light, or operating under constraints similar to those faced by deep-sea organisms. Understanding these contrasts helps us appreciate how flexible evolution truly is. It does not aim for a single ideal form. It explores possibilities, guided by conditions rather than preferences. Sunlight creates one set of outcomes. Darkness creates another. So when we compare surface life and deep life, we are not comparing success and failure. We are comparing two equally valid solutions to different problems. Same biology, different party invitations. And in the deep sea's case, the party happened without the sun, and life still showed up anyway. Isolation is one of evolution's favorite ingredients, and the deep sea has it in abundance. Vast distances, patchy habitats, and limited movement mean that populations are often cut off from one another for long periods of time. When groups of organisms stop exchanging genes, evolution gains the freedom to explore strange possibilities. Without constant mixing or competition from the wider world, body plans begin to drift, twist, and reinvent themselves in ways that would never survive scrutiny in more crowded environments. On the surface, isolation is often temporary. Rivers change course, climates shift, land bridges appear and disappear. Populations separate, but they frequently reconnect. In the deep sea, separation can last for millions of years. A population living around a specific feature or depth range may remain effectively isolated for geological timescales. During that time, small changes accumulate, and small changes, given enough time, must become dramatic. Isolation reduces competition. When fewer species occupy a niche, there is less pressure to conform to successful, established designs. Instead of refining the same basic shapes, evolution can afford to experiment. Traits that would be outcompeted or eliminated on the surface can persist long enough to prove useful in the deep. It is not that the deep sea favors weirdness. It simply does not punish it as quickly. This leads to body plans that look unfamiliar, asymmetrical, or even unfinished by surface standards. Appendages appear in odd places. Proportions seem exaggerated. Some creatures look like collections of parts assembled without instructions. But these designs are not random. They reflect solutions to very specific problems encountered in isolated conditions. Isolation also allows specialization to go further. When a population adapts to a narrow set of conditions and does not have to compete with generalists, it can push traits to extremes. Structures become exaggerated, functions become refined. The result is organisms that are incredibly good at doing one thing in one environment, even if they would fail everywhere else. Over time, these isolated lineages diverge so much that they barely resemble their ancestors. Body plans drift away from familiar templates. This is how the deep sea becomes a museum of evolutionary experiments, displaying outcomes that surface ecosystems would never tolerate long enough to stabilize. Another effect of isolation is the reduction of predation pressure in some environments. With fewer predators, certain defensive traits become less necessary. Armor can be reduced. Speed can be sacrificed. Well, this frees up energy for other features, further driving divergence. Conversely, in isolated environments with specialized predators, prey species may evolve extremely specific defenses that look bizarre, but are perfectly tuned to a single threat. The lack of frequent interaction also changes how organisms interact with one another. Complex social structures are rare. Many species lead solitary lives, encountering others only occasionally. This reduces the need for standardized signaling or shared behavioral norms. Individual variation can persist, and selection can act on small differences that would be smoothed out in larger, more connected populations. From a genetic perspective, isolation allows mutations to spread more easily within small populations. Traits that would be diluted in larger gene pools can become dominant. Over long periods, this leads to pronounced differences in form and function. The deep sea becomes a patchwork of evolutionary trajectories, each shaped by local conditions and long-term separation. To human observers, these isolated designs often look unsettling. They defy our expectations of symmetry, proportion, and familiarity. But that discomfort says more about our biases than about the organisms themselves. We are used to life shaped by visibility and competition. The deep sea follows different rules. In this dark, quiet world, evolution does not need to appeal to aesthetics or efficiency by surface standards. It only needs to work. And without an audience or opposition, it can afford to be bold. So when you encounter a deep sea creature that looks like evolution was left unsupervised, remember this: it probably was. Isolation gave it time, freedom, and silence. And in that silence, evolution tried something strange, found that it worked, and kept going. For most of human history, the deep sea was not mysterious. It was simply ignored. Oceans were thought to be deep, dark, and largely empty below a certain point, a vast, watery nothing that politely existed beneath ships and never interfered. Early scientists assumed that life could not survive beyond relatively shallow depths. The pressure was too great, the cold too severe, the darkness too absolute. Case closed. Or so everyone thought. Then humans did what they always do when told something is impossible. They went to look. The first real cracks in the lifeless deep idea came from dredging expeditions in the 19th century. Nets dragged along the seafloor came back up, not empty, but full of unfamiliar, unsettling creatures. Animals with strange textures, odd proportions, and expressions that suggested they had not agreed to be part of surface science. These early discoveries were often met with disbelief. Surely these things were damaged, malformed, or somehow misinterpreted. Nature would not seriously design organisms like this. Right? It turns out nature absolutely would. As technology improved, exploration went deeper. Submersibles replaced nets, allowing scientists to observe deep-sea life in its natural environment for the first time. And this is when the real shock set in. Creatures that looked barely functional on the surface were perfectly at home in the depths. Animals that collapsed or changed shape when brought up were not fragile mistakes. They were specialists, designed for a world humans had never seen. Early footage from deep-sea dives had a profound effect. Scientists expected to document sparse, struggling life clinging to existence. Instead, they found ecosystems, active, complex, and in some cases disturbingly busy. It was as if a door had been opened to a hidden wing of Earth that had been operating independently the entire time. Reactions ranged from awe to outright confusion. Many of the creatures discovered defied existing biological categories. Body plans did not match known patterns. Behaviors challenged assumptions. Even basic questions like, which end is the head, were sometimes surprisingly difficult to answer. Scientific classification systems had to be updated, expanded, and occasionally humbled. There was also a psychological shift. Seeing these animals alive, or moving through the darkness, changed how scientists thought about habitability. The deep sea was no longer a marginal environment. It was a major one that covered most of the planet and supported life in ways no one had predicted. The public reaction mirrored the scientific one, just with more screaming. Images of deep-sea creatures quickly earned reputations as nightmare fuel. Bug-eyed fish, toothy silhouettes, and amorphous shapes became symbols of the unknown. The phrase "monster of the deep" entered popular culture, not because these animals were aggressive, but because they looked like they had escaped from an entirely different reality. What humans labelled as monstrous, however, was often just unfamiliar. These animals were not designed to be seen by us. They evolved without any concern for surface aesthetics. As when exposed to cameras and lights, they looked strange because we were never meant to be part of their world. Exploration also revealed how much we had underestimated the deep ocean's scale and diversity. Each new dive uncovered species no one had ever documented. Entire communities existed beyond the reach of fishing nets and shipping routes. It became clear that the deep sea was not a footnote in Earth's story. It was a central chapter we had somehow skipped. There was a humbling realization that came with this. Humans had mapped continents, charted skies, and sent machines into space before truly understanding the largest habitat on their own planet. The deep sea had been quietly doing its thing for hundreds of millions of years, while we argued about whether it was even alive. This era of discovery reshaped science, and it forced biologists, chemists, and geologists to work together, because nothing about the deep sea fit neatly into one discipline. It also sparked new questions about life's limits, adaptability, and origins. The shock was not just about strange creatures. It was about realizing how wrong we had been. Nature had not only filled the deep sea with life, it had done so creatively, efficiently, and without asking for approval. In that moment, humanity discovered that Earth still had secrets big enough to rewrite textbooks. And somewhere in the darkness below, life continued on, entirely unimpressed by our surprise at finding it. If you want to understand how far life can be pushed before it gives up, the deep sea is an excellent place to start. It is cold, dark, pressurized, and resource-limited. Yet it hosts ecosystems that function not just adequately, but persistently. These environments force us to rethink the boundaries we once assumed defined where life could exist. More importantly, they challenge our expectations of what life should look like when it does exist. For a long time, humans defined habitability based on surface conditions. Liquid water, moderate temperatures, sunlight, and abundant energy were considered essential. The deep sea quietly dismantles this checklist. It shows that life does not require warmth, brightness, or convenience. It requires chemistry, time, and the ability to adapt to constraints rather than avoid them. One of the biggest lessons from deep sea life is that survival does not have to be fast. Many organisms thrive by being slow, patient, and conservative. They wait rather than chase. They endure rather than dominate. This suggests that life elsewhere in the universe might not be dramatic or obvious. It may not build towering structures or alter its environment quickly. It may simply persist quietly in places we are not used to looking. The deep sea also teaches us that energy does not need to come from stars directly. While sunlight powers most surface ecosystems, deep environments demonstrate that chemical energy can support complex life. This expands the range of potentially habitable environments beyond planets with strong, stable sunlight. Moons, subsurface oceans, and chemically active worlds become much more interesting when viewed through this lens. Another important insight is that life adapts its form to match its environment in ways that can seem counterintuitive. Deep-sea organisms often lack features we associate with success, such as speed, sharp senses, tuned to light, or rigid structures. Instead, they emphasize flexibility, efficiency, and resilience. This suggests that alien life, if it exists, may not resemble the creatures we imagine. It might be soft, slow, and strangely shaped, optimized for stability rather than competition. Patience emerges as a recurring theme. Deep-sea organisms often live long lives, growing slowly and reproducing infrequently. This implies that life can succeed on timescales far beyond human experience. If life evolves elsewhere, it may do so over vast stretches of time, making it easy to miss unless we know how to look for subtle signs. Deep-sea ecosystems also highlight the importance of local conditions. Life does not need globally uniform environments, and it can thrive in pockets, exploiting specific chemical or physical features. This suggests that even worlds that appear hostile overall could host life in isolated regions, hidden beneath surfaces, or within narrow environmental niches. From a scientific perspective, studying deep-sea life forces us to separate life's requirements from our assumptions. Many traits we consider essential turn out to be optional. Light, speed, constant activity, and even complexity are not universal necessities. Life is more flexible than we give it credit for. This has implications for how we search for life beyond Earth. Instead of looking for familiar signs, we may need to look for persistent chemical patterns, slow changes, or subtle interactions that indicate biological processes. Life shaped by darkness and pressure may not announce itself loudly, and it may simply exist. The deep sea also serves as a reminder that intelligence and technology are not inevitable outcomes of evolution. Many deep-sea organisms are highly successful without developing complex behaviors or tools. Survival does not require progress in the way humans define it. This suggests that alien life may be abundant but quiet, successful without ever becoming visible on a cosmic scale. So when we imagine extraterrestrial life, the deep sea offers a useful reality check. Aliens may not be sleek, upright, or curious. They might be soft-bodied, slow-moving, and incredibly patient. They might spend most of their existence waiting for the right moment, in the right conditions, doing just enough to keep going. In learning how life thrives in Earth's darkest places, we expand our understanding of what life is capable of. But the deep sea does not just teach us about our own planet, it teaches us humility. Life does not need to resemble us, impress us, or even acknowledge us. It just needs a way to work. And if we ever do find life elsewhere, there is a decent chance it will remind us less of science fiction heroes and more of a deep-sea creature calmly drifting through the dark, waiting and surviving on its own terms. When you step back and look at the deep sea as a whole, it stops feeling like a collection of strange facts and starts to feel like a philosophy lesson delivered by organisms that do not speak. This is a world defined by darkness, shaped by pressure, and governed by constraints that would end most life before it began. And yet, life did not just appear there. It stayed. It adapted. It settled in and decided this was home. Darkness, yet in the deep ocean, is not the absence of something important. It is a constant condition, like gravity or time. Life did not wait for light to return. It did not attempt to recreate the surface. Instead, it built an entirely different way of existing, one that does not depend on vision, speed, or abundance. Darkness became a backdrop, not a barrier. Pressure, too, became part of the rules rather than an enemy. Instead of fighting it, deep-sea life incorporated pressure into its design. Bodies became flexible. Chemistry adjusted. Structures evolved to function optimally under conditions that would crush most surface organisms instantly. What would destroy us became background noise to them. Adaptation is often portrayed as dramatic or heroic, but in the deep sea, it is quiet and practical. It is not about conquering the environment, as it is about making peace with it. Deep-sea organisms do not try to dominate their surroundings. They synchronize with them. They exist within narrow margins and thrive by respecting limits rather than pushing against them. One of the most powerful lessons from the deep sea is that comfort is not a requirement for success. Warmth, light, and convenience are luxuries, not necessities. Life can function with minimal energy, infrequent opportunity, and long periods of waiting. This challenges our deeply human tendency to associate thriving with ease. There is also a lesson in humility. The deep sea has been running uninterrupted experiments in survival for hundreds of millions of years, largely unnoticed. While humans built civilizations, life below adapted in silence, refining strategies that prioritize endurance over expansion. Success, that in this context is measured not by visibility or dominance, but by persistence. These environments show us that evolution does not aim for beauty, speed, or intelligence. It aims for continuation. Whatever traits support that goal are favored, regardless of how strange they appear to us. In the deep sea, weirdness is not a side effect. It is often the solution. The creatures shaped by darkness and pressure are reminders that life is not fragile in the way we often imagine. It is fragile in some conditions, yes, but astonishingly robust in others. It bends, it compromises, it finds ways to operate within limits that seem impossible from the outside. For us, these lessons extend beyond biology. They invite reflection on how we define resilience and success. Life in the deep sea does not rush, but it does not waste energy on unnecessary features. It does not demand ideal circumstances. It makes do with what exists and builds a system around that reality. As listeners, it is easy to view deep-sea life as distant and alien. But in many ways, it reflects a fundamental truth shared by all living things. Survival is not about perfection. It is about persistence. It is about continuing, even when conditions are not favorable, even when progress is slow, even when the environment is indifferent. The deep sea does not care if life is impressive. It only tests whether life works. And again, life passes that test by being stubborn enough to keep going. So when you think about the darkness below, do not imagine emptiness or despair. Imagine patience. Imagine systems that function quietly, efficiently, and relentlessly. Yes, imagine life that does not need applause, light, or comfort. Because in the end, the deepest lesson of the deep sea is simple. Life does not need ideal conditions to thrive. It only needs a way forward and the stubborn determination to take it, one slow, pressure-resistant step at a time.